Billionaire saw her maid's daughter returning brother's birthday cake. Then he secretly followed. $12.75 was the entire small world of a young girl. Lila stood at the checkout counter clutching the crumpled bills in her hand, trying over and over to count them again. But the math in her head had failed her. She did not have enough money. Under the impatient gaze of the cashier and the long line of people waiting behind her, she was forced to make a cruel choice. "I'm sorry. I thought I had enough," she said with a calmness that belied the storm inside her, returning the blue robot-shaped cake that her 8-year-old brother had dreamed of for 2 long months. She forced a smile to mask her failure, but she was mistaken. No one in this crowd would overlook her shame. In the nearby shadows, a wealthy man watched. Henry Blackwell, a 72-year-old billionaire owner of a chain of real estate holdings and a transportation empire, observed her every move. The price of the cake was only $12.75, but the price she paid for leaving it behind was a broken heart. Lila looked down at her brother's hopeful face. Time seemed to stop. Every glowing red number on the checkout screen was a painful reminder. She had calculated carefully 3 times before leaving the house: 1 $5 bill, 3 $1 bills, and a handful of coins gathered from picking up discarded cans. But now Lila realized she had been wrong. The space around her seemed to shrink. The sounds of carts and conversations faded, leaving only her, the cake, and Owen's expectant face. The weight of shame and disappointment pressed down on her shoulders, a feeling she had never known, yet she struggled to maintain her composure. She drew a deep breath, straightened her posture, and handed the cake back to the cashier, the words of her grandfather echoing in her mind. "Be strong. Protect the ones you love." Every step, every glance made her acutely aware of the heaviness of this choice. Yet in the shadows, Henry remained still, his sharp eyes memorizing every detail, every subtle gesture, ready to enter this family's life in a way no one could have anticipated. If you are feeling the weight and emotion of this story, subscribe to the YouTube channel Emotional Echoes so you do not miss the touching and deeply moving stories we share every day. Do not forget to like and share to spread these meaningful stories to more people. We would love to know where you are watching from, so please leave a comment to tell us where you are hearing this story, so we can see that the messages of kindness, responsibility, and humanity have reached the hearts of audiences everywhere. Henry Blackwell stood silently in the corner of the store, his gaze following every movement of Lila and Owen. He did not merely see the disappointment and shame etched across the little girl's face. He also recognized the resilience and sense of responsibility she carried on her small shoulders. His sharp blue eyes swept the room, memorizing every minute detail from Lila's worn denim jacket to the robot-shaped cake glimmering in bright blue. Henry understood that she was not only the daughter of Maya, his devoted housekeeper, but also a child who had been raised to be independent, to uphold her dignity no matter the circumstance. As Lila bent down to look at Owen, whose eyes brimmed with hope and trust, Henry felt the silent pain the boy was enduring, a sense of sorrow that no amount of his wealth could instantly remedy. He noticed a small silver badge peeking from beneath Lila's collar, a detail that spoke of courage and struggle, something he knew belonged only to those who had faced battles bravely. The badge reminded Henry of a man he had once served with in the military, a man who had fought with courage and integrity, whose legacy now seemed to live on in this little girl. He listened to the surrounding sounds, the chatter, the footsteps. Yet in Henry's mind, all of it blurred, leaving only the image of the 2 children and the weight that Lila bore. He felt a profound sense of responsibility, not merely as an observer, but as someone who could alter this moment. Every heartbeat, every subtle gesture of Lila's was etched in his mind. He knew that if he did not intervene, she would face an unnecessary failure, a sorrow that could follow her for the rest of her life. Henry drew a deep breath, his eyes hardening with determination, his resolve as unyielding as it had been on distant battlefields. He decided that he would not just stand by, but step forward, though his actions had to be delicate, preserving the dignity of this family. Every step he would take, every decision in the coming moments, had the potential to shape a new path for Lila and Owen. Within him, a quiet plan began to form, a plan that would offer aid while maintaining the pride and self-respect of these children. He watched Lila let out a small sigh, her forced smile faltering, and in that instant Henry knew that it was her quiet strength that had touched his heart. A heart that had seen too much pain and injustice, now compelling him to act not merely out of kindness, but from a deep responsibility toward these small lives whom fate had tested so relentlessly. Lila held Owen's hand tightly as they stepped out of the store, the heaviness of the world pressing down on her shoulders. Late afternoon in Brooklyn felt cold and unwelcoming, the flickering streetlights casting uneven glows on the damp sidewalks, the sounds of cars and passers-by blending together but doing nothing to ease her worry. Owen walked silently beside her, his small hand gripping hers, his eyes still fixed on the robot-shaped cake that was now out of reach. Lila told herself she had to be strong, had to keep her little brother reassured even as her own heart tightened with each beat. When they reached the basement apartment, the door opened to reveal a cramped, narrow space with damp-stained walls, cold cement floors, and a musty smell that overpowered any hint of food. This was the place where Lila and Owen, together with their mother, endured long, difficult days. The small apartment offered just enough room for an old sofa, a low dining table, and a few chairs all worn and well used over many years. Lila's eyes flicked to the kitchen table where a hastily packed food box from lunch remained. She knew that their mother Maya had worked 2 consecutive shifts, both as a cleaner in the office building and as a server in a restaurant, just to pay the rent and provide meals for her children. Owen gently placed his hand on her shoulder, letting out a quiet sigh, his eyes flashing a touch of sadness, yet also a quiet endurance. Lila bent down, meeting her brother's gaze, forcing a small, warm smile to reassure him that everything would be all right. She remembered her grandfather's lessons to always remain steadfast, to protect those you love, and in this moment she felt a weight of responsibility greater than anything else. The tiny room seemed to emphasize the hardships her family endured, from material scarcity to the mental strain of a mother facing long work hours and unpaid bills. Lila's gaze roamed the apartment, noting each crack in the walls, each tattered curtain dusted with grime, and she vowed to care for Owen, to shield him from the sorrow and disappointment she had just experienced at the store. Loneliness and responsibility mingled within her, yet they also strengthened her resolve. Owen looked up at his sister, lips pressed together, but he didn't cry, as if he were trying to protect her emotions. Lila took a deep breath, feeling the bone-chilling cold of the floor and the stifling air of the apartment, yet she maintained her composure to hide her own disappointment, to be a support for her brother. Together they stepped into the tiny kitchen, where a few scattered food containers and old spice jars remained. Lila surveyed the cramped space they called home, fully aware of the harsh reality her family faced every day, and within her heart, a quiet determination began to take shape. Despite poverty and disappointment, she vowed she would not let Owen lose hope or the small joys he so rightfully deserved. Lila placed her hand on Owen's shoulder, pulling him close, striving to create a sense of safety in the cramped, cold apartment. She knew that in this moment her role was no longer just that of a child, but of a protector, a guardian standing between her brother and the disappointments and sadness she had just endured. Owen looked up at her, his clear eyes tinged with a hint of sorrow, and Lila forced a gentle smile, compelling herself to remain calm and steady so that he could feel stability. She reminded herself of the lessons her grandfather had taught her about resilience and responsibility, that in every circumstance the older family members must shoulder the burdens and shield those weaker than themselves. Lila sat down beside Owen on the worn chair, softly stroking his hair, speaking gently to reassure him that everything would be all right, that sometimes one must accept small failures to prepare for greater victories in life. She decided not to tell their mother about the robot cake they had been unable to buy, knowing that if Maya knew, it would only deepen her worry, the feelings of helplessness and exhaustion pressing even harder on a mother already worn down. Lila told herself that her mission was to keep Owen feeling that he still had a safe world, where good things still existed even when material possessions could not always fulfill his desires. She spun small stories and imaginative games, helping him forget the sadness over the cake, transforming their cramped apartment into a safe, warm space within their imagination. When Owen asked about the cake, Lila looked into his eyes and offered a gentle smile, telling him that they would find another way to surprise him, a way for him to still feel joy on his birthday. She knew that maintaining calm and speaking with care was the only way to protect Owen's childlike spirit, preventing him from feeling disappointment or despair. Lila vowed to do everything she could to ensure his happiness, even if it meant sacrificing her own comfort, enduring silent sorrow without letting Owen see. She recalled her grandfather's teachings that a true grown-up is one who shields and bears burdens, using inner strength to protect those they love. In the small apartment among the cracks in the walls and the lingering scent of dampness, Lila felt the unmistakable arrival of her own early maturity, knowing that from this moment on she was no longer a carefree child, but the silent hero in the small world of the two siblings, someone who would protect and guide her brother through every challenge life placed before them. Henry Blackwell stood still at a safe distance, his eyes intently following Lila and Owen as the two siblings entered the basement apartment. He did not rush to act, observing carefully, committing every small gesture, every expression on the girl's face, and every anxious yet determined glance Lila gave her brother to memory. In the moment Lila bent down to comfort Owen, Henry noticed beneath her worn denim collar a glimmer of a silver badge reflecting the faint light of the ceiling bulb. He recognized immediately that it was a medal of merit, something only those who had faced battle with courage could rightfully possess. The small but powerful badge reminded him of the heroic past of the person who had awarded it, a legacy now living on in the little girl standing before Owen. Henry recalled his own days of combat, the comrades who had sacrificed themselves and the courage they had shown under the harshest conditions. Looking at Lila, he saw in her the same resilience, determination, and self-respect he had once witnessed in seasoned warriors. He felt that she bore the weight of her entire family on her shoulders, protecting her younger brother while controlling her own emotions, safeguarding pride and dignity. Henry drew a deep breath, his heartbeat slowing, yet his mind sharpened so that every small detail. The dilapidated apartment, the weak lighting, the musty smell, and the old furnishings was etched vividly into his memory. He knew that if he did not intervene, Lila would face disappointments and injustices she did not deserve. The faint gleam of the badge beneath her collar made him realize that this was no ordinary child, but the descendant of someone who had fought with courage, a legacy of spirit manifest in her very being. A deep sense of responsibility surged within him, a stronger drive than anything he had felt in the years of managing his real estate empire. Henry knew that his next steps had to be careful yet decisive. He could no longer simply observe from afar. Each passing moment, he watched Lila care for Owen, noting her early maturity and quiet strength, fully aware that his actions in the coming minutes could shape the future of the two siblings and their mother struggling outside. Seeing the girl carefully conceal her disappointment while maintaining calm for her brother, Henry exhaled quietly, a silent resolve forming in his heart. He would enter this family's life, but in a way that respected their dignity and pride, transforming this painful moment into a turning point that could change their lives. His gaze remained fixed, tracking every breath and step of Lila and Owen, and in Henry's mind a quiet yet unwavering plan began to take shape. One that would offer help while preserving the humanity of these small lives whom fate had tested so relentlessly. Lila held Owen's hand tightly as they stepped out of the store, the chill of a Brooklyn afternoon seeping through their thin jackets, making them shiver. The wind swept through the narrow streets, carrying the damp scent of salt mist mingling with the roar of traffic, the calls of street vendors and the footsteps echoing on the wet sidewalks. They walked slowly, each step seeming heavier under the weight of disappointment pressing down on Lila. Owen remained silent, his small hand clinging to hers, his eyes still fixed longingly on the robot-shaped cake he had dreamed of, full of regret, yet holding back tears so as not to worry his sister further. Lila told herself she had to stay calm, to be a steady shoulder for her brother, even as her own heart tightened with every beat. The flickering streetlights reflected off puddles left by the morning rain, casting long, uneven shadows of the two siblings across the sidewalk. The scent of gasoline, the aroma of bread from nearby shops and distant car horns created a backdrop, both familiar and cold, emphasizing the loneliness and pressure Lila bore. Every step through the bustling streets reminded her of her responsibility to shield Owen of the financial burdens and harsh realities their family faced. Lila took a deep breath, surveying the old houses and cluttered small shops around them, acutely aware of the contrast between the outside world and the fragile sense of safety she wanted to provide her brother. She knew they still had a ways to go before reaching their basement apartment, a place that would offer warmth and shelter. Yet in this moment, each gust of cold wind, each weak streetlight reinforced the struggle and weight Lila carried, tightening her heart but also strengthening her resolve to protect Owen from the sorrows and disappointments of the world beyond. Henry Blackwell stepped out of the shadows of the store, walking confidently and calmly toward the checkout counter. His eyes fell on the blue robot-shaped cake, the same one Lila had been forced to return in silent anguish, and without hesitation, he reached for his sleek black leather wallet. He placed a $20 bill on the counter in front of the cashier and said he would purchase the cake along with the candle that Lila had been unable to afford. The cashier raised an eyebrow, surprised by this unexpected gesture, while the surrounding customers froze their gazes following him with a mixture of curiosity and astonishment. Henry knew that the cake cost only $12.75, but its true value for young Owen was his entire small world, and for Lila, the failure to buy it had been a silent shock she had carried alone. He felt the pressure and responsibility weighing on the girl, the early maturity beyond her years, and the quiet courage she showed for her brother. When Henry placed the money on the counter, carefully leaving the remainder for the cashier to keep, he seemed to make an unspoken promise that the boy would receive the joy he deserved and that Lila would not have to bear this small heartbreak alone. His gaze followed Lila standing at a distance, calm outwardly but clearly struggling within, and he understood that his action was more than buying a cake. It was the first step in changing a difficult circumstance, a way to honor the dignity and effort of the little girl. He carefully accepted the cake from the cashier, inspecting every small detail, the bright blue color and the robot design on top, perfect in every way, just as the boy had dreamed. Henry stepped out of the store, holding the cake securely in his hands, his eyes still following the two siblings as they made their way toward their basement apartment. He knew that in just a few minutes, when they reached home, he would have the chance to place this cake into Owen's hands. More importantly, he would witness and feel the gradual transformation of the children's small world, all sparked by a single act of kindness he was willing to undertake. Each step Henry took on the cold Brooklyn sidewalk carried a quiet but steadfast determination that from this moment forward he would no longer stand apart. He would enter the Thompson family's life to protect, to help, and to ensure that the sorrow and disappointment Lila had just endured would no longer haunt them. Henry Blackwell sat behind the wheel of his black sedan, keeping a safe distance as he followed Lila and Owen through the familiar yet cold streets of Brooklyn. The flickering streetlights glimmered on the damp sidewalks, reflecting off small puddles left from the morning rain, casting long, uneven shadows of the two siblings across the pavement. Henry did not accelerate or draw attention. He drove slowly, his heartbeat and breathing synchronized with the rhythm of Lila's steps, observing every small motion, every gesture, the balance of strength and worry evident in each movement. He noticed Lila holding Owen's hand tightly, his chest rising and falling with each breath, his eyes still shimmering with fragile hope, yet tinged with regret. The old houses, the dim yellow light from windows, and the run-down basement apartments lining the streets made Henry acutely aware of the hardships this family endured. Every street, every crack in a wall, every flickering lamppost was memorized like crucial data to ensure that when he approached the apartment, he would not disturb or frighten the children. Henry watched Lila press gently on Owen's hand, whispering something that coaxed a small, reassuring smile, and he realized she was striving to shield her brother from disappointment, concealing her own sorrow to be a source of stability for him. Every slight turn of the wheel, every glance in the rearview mirror reminded Henry that his forthcoming actions needed to respect their dignity and guarantee the absolute safety of the two siblings. When they stopped in front of the old building, Henry's car remained at a distance, the streetlight illuminating the steps leading down to the basement apartment. He watched as Lila carefully opened the door for Owen to step down first, each movement slow but deliberate, reflecting her early maturity and the responsibility she bore. Henry felt the weight of his own responsibility. Clearly, delivering the cake to Owen was more than a simple act. It was the first step in bringing safety and hope to the entire family. He paused, taking in the surroundings, noting every potential risk from passers-by and passing cars to small details on the sidewalk, so that when he stepped toward the apartment, he would not disrupt the calm or disturb the sense of security Lila was striving to provide. Every passing moment, each footstep of the siblings, the weak streetlight and the cold air, emphasized the pressure Lila carried, yet also strengthened Henry's resolve, reminding him that his intervention must be both subtle and decisive, as from the shadows he prepared to enter this family's life, carrying the cake and hope for the small hearts that so desperately needed protection. Henry took a deep breath before stepping out of his sedan, carefully holding the blue robot-shaped cake in its sturdy plastic box, his eyes never leaving Lila and Owen as they entered the basement apartment. The old door creaked softly as Lila opened it, letting in the damp, cold air from the cement steps, giving Henry a vivid sense of the harsh living conditions within. Maya, Lila, and Owen's mother emerged from the small kitchen, her face tired but still carrying an air of quiet strength. She nodded slightly to her children, but her gaze quickly shifted to Henry, a stranger standing in their home with a cake in hand, immediately putting her on alert. Maya tugged down her apron, trying to mask her fatigue and emphasize her composure, stepping slowly toward Henry, her eyes reflecting worry mixed with suspicion. Henry met her gaze, his voice deep, warm, and steady, offering no hurried explanation or request for permission. He simply placed the cake on the table and said he had come for a simple reason, to ensure that young Owen would receive what he deserved. Maya took a step back, gripping the edge of her apron, her heartbeat quickening as unease crept in. She knew she did not want help from anyone, especially a wealthy stranger, as it could wound her already fragile pride, yet Henry's unexpected presence made it impossible to ignore her eyes, searching him for any sign of deceit or ill intent. Lila stood behind Owen, keeping him safe, and reassured her eyes, following both her mother and Henry, sensing the tension that filled the small apartment, yet understanding that this could be a chance to lift the shadow of disappointment from the returned cake. Henry gently emphasized that he was aware of Maya's efforts and responsibilities, that he was not there to judge or criticize, but only to help in the most subtle way possible, respecting her dignity and hard work. Maya furrowed her brow, striving to maintain calm, yet internally she waged a battle between pride and necessity, between caution and hope. Owen looked up at his mother, and Henry, not fully understanding the situation, but sensing the tension, his small hand still tightly holding his sister's, his eyes full of trust. Henry remained patient, observing in silence just long enough for Maya to recognize his actions as genuinely sincere, understanding that the cake was more than a small gift for Owen. It was a symbol of care and protection extended to the entire family. Moments passed in quiet intensity as Henry waited for Maya to open her heart, to see that he was not a threat, but someone who could transform a small moment of sadness into hope, and gradually her gaze softened, recognizing the sincerity and determination in every gesture he made. Henry placed the blue robot-shaped cake on the small table, the weak light glinting through the plastic box, making its bright color shimmer. He looked directly at Maya, his voice deep yet steady, and mentioned the small silver badge he had seen under Lila's collar. He told Maya about the man who had awarded that badge, Lila's grandfather, who had fought courageously in the military and taught future generations through bravery and integrity. Henry emphasized that he understood the sacrifices and the resilient spirit of this family, recognizing that Lila carried the weight of the household on her shoulders, caring for Owen while preserving her dignity amid hardship. Maya took a small step back, her eyes a mix of surprise and skepticism, yet Henry's words about past heroism, about people who had fought and protected one another, began to convey a sense of sincerity. He continued recounting that he had known and worked alongside Lila's grandfather, witnessing his courage and dedication in the most challenging circumstances, and that this legacy now lived on in his granddaughter and her little brother. Lila stood behind Owen, her eyes bright but alert, observing her mother's reaction. Owen looked at the cake, his gaze full of hope, not yet understanding the story of the badge or his grandfather, but sensing the solemnity and respect in Henry's actions. Henry explained that he had not come to offer criticism or to help in a condescending manner, but to create trust, to provide reassurance that this family deserved protection and respect. Maya felt the skepticism in her heart gradually give way to curiosity and belief, her gaze softening as Henry recounted memories of Lila's grandfather, emphasizing that his legacy lived in her, and that Henry's actions were meant to protect those values, not charity or superficial generosity. Lila gently held Owen's hand, feeling her mother's tense breathing, aware that this was a crucial moment for the family to understand that this help came from awareness, gratitude, and responsibility, not pity. Henry surveyed the small apartment, taking in every detail of the hardships Maya and her children endured, and in his heart he resolved that from this moment forward, every action he took would be carried out with subtlety and respect for dignity, yet strong enough to ensure that Lila and Owen would no longer face disappointment or injustice alone, and that they would recognize that trust and courage were always valued and protected. Finally, Maya nodded softly, her eyes glistening, yet filled with reassurance, realizing that Henry had not come to control or judge, but to safeguard and honor the values her family upheld, and in that instant, a seed of trust began to take root, marking the first step toward the forthcoming change in their lives. Henry moved slowly through the apartment, his gaze sweeping over every small detail that he had previously only glimpsed from a distance. The damp walls lined with cracks, the loose wires hanging from the ceiling, the cold cement floors, and the cramped arrangement of old belongings, all combined to create a space both deprived and tense. Maya stood nearby, striving to remain composed, though her eyes betrayed her exhaustion, her hands clutching her apron as if to protect the last remnants of her pride. Lila stayed close to Owen, gently reassuring him with soft squeezes of his hand, her eyes alert yet filled with concern. Owen looked around with a mixture of curiosity and slight fear, not yet fully aware of the pressures that Henry recognized. Henry paused before the small kitchen, where only a few scattered food containers and old spice jars remained, glancing up at the slow-turning rusty ceiling fan that creaked with each rotation. He understood the immense pressure Maya bore to keep her family surviving day by day. He gently inquired about living expenses, rent, electricity, and outstanding debts, and Maya responded cautiously but honestly, sharing the financial struggles, the back-to-back work shifts, and unpaid medical bills following the death of Lila's grandfather. Lila stood nearby, her eyes following her mother, absorbing each word. Each worry mingled with pride and burden. Henry could clearly see Maya's resilience, yet also sense her fatigue, feeling the injustice and scarcity she and her children endured. The cramped space, dim lighting, and surrounding clutter highlighted the family's tension, but also emphasized the importance of Henry's next actions. He knew that a single, careful yet decisive act could bring reassurance and change to this family's life. Understanding that their hardships were not merely material, but also a test of the courage and dignity Lila, Owen, and Maya demonstrated every day. Every detail of the apartment told their story, reminding Henry that his role was not simply to provide a cake or a meal, but to protect, support, and honor the quiet, steadfast efforts this family had carried for so long. Maya suddenly collapsed onto the kitchen floor as she tried to answer Henry's questions about bills and living expenses, her body going limp and her eyes closing for a brief moment. Lila screamed in panic, rushing forward to support her mother, but her small hands could not hold up her mother's weight. Owen cried loudly, his voice trembling with fear, unable to understand what was happening. Henry immediately bent down, placing a steady hand on Maya's shoulder, checking her pulse and breathing, sensing that her body was exhausted from fatigue, malnutrition, and the prolonged pressures of continuous work. He instructed Lila to gently lead Owen out of direct sight so that he would not become more frightened, while he called his trusted private physician with a calm but authoritative voice, his tone carrying unquestionable decisiveness. Maya began to breathe rapidly, her face pale and damp with beads of sweat on her forehead, her hands shaking as she gripped her apron tightly. Lila looked at her mother, tears streaming down her face, her heart tightening with a mixture of helplessness and an overwhelming sense of responsibility to protect her little brother. Owen stayed near the doorway, his eyes wide, watching every movement of his sister, his heart racing, but still following Lila's guidance. Henry monitored Maya's pulse and blood pressure, clearly recognizing that this was a medical emergency, a combination of exhaustion, malnutrition, and prolonged psychological stress that, if not addressed immediately, could become life-threatening. He reassured Lila that her brother would be safe, that her role now was to keep Owen calm and secure while he managed the medical situation. When the private doctor confirmed he was on his way, Henry carefully laid Maya on the floor, warming her with his hands while offering calm reassurance, monitoring each breath. Lila knelt beside her mother, wiping the sweat and tears from her forehead, whispering that everything would be all right, that they were no longer alone. Owen pressed into a corner, eyes wide, crying but observing Henry's attentive care. The tense atmosphere in the cramped apartment reached its peak, yet Henry remained composed, his sharp gaze following every movement to ensure no risk was overlooked, his presence bringing both strength and safety to the three of them. When the doctor arrived, Henry guided every step, providing details about Maya's work schedule, diet, and health condition, while ensuring Lila and Owen remained calm and secure within the apartment. Maya lay on the mobile bed, eyes closed, but her face showing less pallor. The fear easing as she realized someone was caring for her attentively, without judgment or reproach, only protecting and assisting. Lila stayed close still, holding Owen's hand, a mixture of relief and lingering worry washing over her, understanding that from this moment on they were no longer alone, and Henry was no longer just a stranger, but a quiet, powerful presence safeguarding and supporting her family from the shadows. Once Maya was safely settled on the bed, Henry sat down on the old metal chair by the kitchen table, his eyes still carefully watching Lila and Owen as he began asking Maya detailed questions about their monthly living expenses, the rent, electricity, water, and food costs. Maya answered cautiously but honestly, her voice trembling from exhaustion and stress, explaining that the rent was $600 a month, winter electricity could reach around $200, though she often kept the heat low to save, and food cost approximately $50 per week, relying on coupons and buying only basic items. She spoke of medical debts accumulated from caring for her late father, ongoing treatment, and unpaid prescriptions, leaving bills perpetually marked in red letters from the hospital, a worry that always hung over her. Henry memorized each number, calculating in his mind the severity of their situation, realizing that Maya had to work 2, sometimes 3 shifts in a day, cleaning high-rise buildings by day, and serving in a restaurant at night, just to keep the family alive, to ensure a roof over their heads and at least a minimal dinner for Lila and Owen. He recognized that what Maya endured was not only material deprivation, but also immense psychological pressure, a compounded responsibility that had nearly exhausted her body and mind. Lila stood close, listening intently to her mother's words, her eyes filled with both surprise and sorrow, clearly perceiving Maya's struggle in every detail, from cutting spending to working through fatigue so her children would not go without. Owen pressed close to his sister, not yet understanding the numbers, but sensing the deep concern of his mother and the tension permeating the small room. Henry silently took note, each detail and figure forming vivid data about the harsh reality this family faced. He saw the resilience, but also recognized human limits. Without timely intervention, the situation could have serious consequences for the family's health, well-being, and safety. He emphasized to Maya that every detail was now known and would be addressed with respect for her dignity, that the assistance was not mere charity, but an act of protection, fairness, and safety. Lila felt Henry's decisiveness and, understanding her heart, a mixture of worry and hope. Realizing that at last their family would not have to struggle alone, that the red numbers on the bills would no longer weigh endlessly upon them, but instead would be met with measures that brought stability and security for her mother and brother. Every word, every question, and every figure formed a clear picture of their difficult life, laying the foundation for Henry to prepare his next action steps that would sustainably and humanely change the future of the Thompson family. Maya sat motionless on the bed, her hands gripping her apron as if to hold on to the last fragments of her dignity, her eyes distant while her mind swirled with mounting thoughts. A fierce inner conflict rose within her, caught between pride and the fear of losing her independence. She didn't want anyone to witness her struggles and failures, nor did she want Lila and Owen to think their mother was not strong enough to carry everything. She felt guilt for not being able to buy Owen the robot cake he had dreamed of, torn between a small gift and the necessities of survival. Yet at the same time, she reminded herself that this decision was right, the only way to protect the family from a severe financial crisis. Lila stood close by, holding Owen tightly, her eyes wide with both surprise and worry, observing every movement of her mother and sensing the extreme tension, while also understanding that her mother was holding herself together to shield them from harm. Maya recalled the endless days of work, from cleaning high-rise apartments to serving in restaurants at night, bearing the full weight of both material and emotional pressure, now brought vividly to the surface under the watchful and commanding presence of Henry. His presence made her feel both safe and uneasy, for she did not want to be seen as someone needing rescue, nor to lose the independence that had long been her greatest pride. Every word and gesture from Henry stirred her indecision, caught between accepting help and preserving her dignity, between gratitude and fear of dependence. In the quiet moments, Maya felt her heart, both fragile and strong, tense, yet yearning for genuine support. Lila gently stroked her mother's hair, offering calm and reassurance, while Owen pressed close to his sister, his innocent eyes filled with hope. Maya saw in her daughter's eyes the faith and resilience she had instilled in her children, which filled her with pride, yet intensified her fear of losing autonomy, worrying that accepting help might mean surrendering control over her own life. Yet the love she felt for Lila and Owen rose above her pride, helping her realize that true strength is not always in enduring alone, but in knowing when to open oneself to timely and sincere support. Each breath, each glance, every feeling in her body became a silent battle between responsibility and pride, fear and hope. And in this moment, Maya began to understand that maintaining dignity did not mean bearing everything alone, but choosing how to receive help while still honoring herself and her children. The pressures from outside, the scarcity and the weight of the family rested heavily on her shoulders, yet internally, Maya began to find a path, a way to balance independence with accepting support, opening the possibility for gradual change for her family without sacrificing her own sense of self-worth. Henry sat in the small kitchen, the weak yellow light casting over his stern face, his hand resting on the blue robot-shaped cake like a symbol of what he was determined to protect. His eyes swept the room, taking in every small detail from the loose wires and damp walls to the worn belongings that the Thompson family relied on with utmost frugality. In his mind, he calculated the figures for rent, electricity, food, and medical debts, realizing that their hardship was not a temporary setback, but the result of an unjust system where hardworking people faced undue pressure and deprivation. The exhaustion on Maya's face, the worry in Lila's eyes, and the innocent yet tense expression of Owen made him understand that his actions could not stop at buying a cake or providing temporary care. He decided that a greater long-term solution was needed to ensure that this family would no longer endure constant hardship and pressure. In Henry's mind, a plan began to take shape, from reassessing the management at the company where Maya worked to reviewing wage policies, working hours, and benefits for low-wage employees to ensure that no one would have to struggle, as Maya did, just to keep a job and protect her family. He considered restructuring management, removing unjust supervisors, and changing internal policies to create a fairer environment, while also addressing the Thompson family's debts and living conditions, covering rent arrears, securing a safe apartment, and providing necessary support for daily essentials. Henry knew that this step had to be executed carefully, respecting Maya's dignity and independence, so that she would not feel controlled or stripped of self-reliance, yet it had to bring practical and sustainable results. His gaze shifted to Lila and Owen sitting close to their mother, realizing that their early maturity and quiet courage would be strengthened if Maya's work and living conditions improved, and that this was also a way to honor the past, the badge, and the legacy of Lila's grandfather, whom he had known well. Henry took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility yet filled with resolve, knowing that only a comprehensive, decisive action could truly change the life of this family, bringing the safety, hope, and fairness they deserved. In that quiet moment, he vowed that he would not stop, that he would no longer remain a distant observer, but become a protector, a guide ensuring that Lila, Owen, and Maya would never face loneliness and injustice alone again. Every planned decision and action he contemplated now was directed toward a single goal: to transform the future of the Thompson family in a lasting and humane way. Henry led Maya, Lila, and Owen into the temporary penthouse he had prepared, a spacious, warm, and secure space that left all three of them astonished. Owen leapt onto the soft sofa, his eyes shining with delight, while Lila stayed close to her mother, her gaze a mix of curiosity and caution. Keenly aware of the difference between this place and the cramped, cold basement apartment they had just left, Henry placed the blue robot cake on the table and looked at the children, his voice deep, warm, yet firm, explaining that this was a temporary space where the family could rest safely and comfortably, free from worries about electricity, water, or fire hazards from old wiring. He emphasized to Lila that her role now was to learn how to lead and protect her little brother, just as her grandfather had taught her lessons in discipline and responsibility. Lila bent down, holding Owen close, feeling the weight of his words while recognizing an opportunity to learn and grow. Henry spoke of the principles he followed in the military and in business, that every person must exercise self-discipline responsibly, prioritize the needs of those who depend on them, and know when to step back to protect what is truly important. He highlighted that caring for her brother, helping her mother, and maintaining dignity in difficult circumstances were invaluable lessons, and that this temporary apartment was a space for Lila, Owen, and Maya to experience safety practice, organization, observation, and wise decision-making. Maya stood nearby, still clutching her apron, but her eyes were less tense, sensing that this was not merely a physical refuge, but also a place for the family to learn and strengthen their inner resilience. Owen looked at Henry, his eyes bright with curiosity and trust, absorbing the lessons on discipline without feeling burdened, comforted by the knowledge that they were now protected. Henry concluded his guidance with a soft yet authoritative statement: in life, no one is left behind, and from this moment on, this family would learn to stand firm, protect one another, and grow together, beginning with the safety, warmth, and the lessons in discipline he had just imparted. The next morning, Henry sat in his spacious office at his building, sunlight streaming through the tall windows onto the polished wooden desk, strewn with personnel files and work reports from the company where Maya was employed. He carefully flipped through each page, reading reports thoroughly, noting mismanagement in human resources, excessive working hours imposed on employees, and complaints about harsh working conditions that he had never scrutinized so closely before. Henry realized that changing a few small details would not suffice. The entire system needed to be reformed to ensure that every worker in the company was treated fairly, allowed adequate rest, and received proper benefits. He decided that unjust managers who pressured and intimidated employees must be held accountable, some to be dismissed and replaced with leaders who understood the value of people and fairness in the workplace. Henry prepared an urgent meeting with the Human Resources Department, highlighting violations and specific cases such as Maya and her colleagues, who had been forced to work excessive overtime just to survive, and demanded immediate review of wages, working hours, sick leave, and other employee rights. He emphasized that the company must become an environment where employees no longer live in fear or exhaustion, where human dignity and health are paramount. Henry laid out a detailed plan, from investigating overworked shifts, reviewing contracts, assessing managerial competence, to establishing new procedures for monitoring and supporting employees, ensuring that situations like Maya's would not recur. Every step was carefully calculated, both swift and effective, to reform the system while maintaining order and stability within the company, while protecting workers who needed fairness. A strong sense of determination filled him, knowing that this was not merely a solution to Maya's individual problem, but a long-term commitment to creating a humane and sustainable work environment. Henry gazed out the window, his eyes resolute, envisioning Maya, Lila, and Owen living in a fairer world where their mother no longer had to struggle alone, where other employees were also safeguarded, and gradually the lives of families like the Thompsons would be truly transformed, not through temporary aid, but through comprehensive and just reform. Every number, every file, every decision in Henry's hands at that moment became the foundation for a new personnel system, one in which human dignity and rights were prioritized and where stories like Maya's would no longer have to happen. Immediately after finalizing the personnel reforms, Henry turned his attention to addressing the urgent matters affecting the Thompson family directly. He contacted the landlord of the basement apartment, informing them that all safety violations would be promptly addressed, and committed to immediately paying off Maya's outstanding rent, ensuring that the family would no longer face the threat of eviction or utility disconnection. Henry also contacted the landlord to settle all outstanding debts and terminate the lease, ensuring Maya would leave with a clean record and no financial burden. Meanwhile, Lila and Owen stood close to their mother, their eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and awe at Henry's decisive and forceful actions, clearly sensing the profound changes about to unfold in their lives. Maya remained still, clutching her apron, her heart both moved and incredulous that someone truly cared about her family's safety and living conditions without judgment or diminishing her dignity. Henry explained that paying off the rent and addressing safety concerns was not a temporary gesture, but part of a long-term plan to protect the family, ensuring they would no longer live in fear or under constant financial pressure. He emphasized that the apartment was now not just a temporary shelter, but a safe space where the family could breathe and contemplate the future without the weight of previous worries. Lila held Owen's hand, gently reassuring him that they would no longer need to worry about rent or utilities, and the sense of security made the boy smile faintly, his eyes lighting up as if he had discovered a small miracle in everyday life. Maya looked at Henry, emotions swelling with gratitude mingled with surprise and pride, realizing that this was not merely about material assistance, but also about protection care and recognition for the relentless efforts she had carried to keep her family afloat. Henry moved around the apartment, inspecting every detail from electrical outlets and ceiling lights to windows and the kitchen, ensuring that all risks were eliminated while guiding Maya and Lila on basic steps to maintain safety and prevent future incidents. The atmosphere in the apartment shifted noticeably from heavy and tense to calm and secure, and the three of them immediately felt the difference. Henry watched them with deep focus, knowing that this step not only resolved debts and material dangers, but also provided stability, reassurance, and dignity for Maya, Lila, and Owen, laying the foundation for lasting changes where the family could live safely, grow, and thrive without the burden of pressures they had endured for so many years. The first night in the penthouse passed in a peaceful atmosphere, a stark contrast to the tension and worry the Thompson family had endured in their basement apartment. Maya neatly placed the bags of clothes and personal belongings into the closet, her hands still trembling slightly, but her eyes showing less strain, a sense of relief slowly seeping into her mind. Lila and Owen sat on the soft sofa. The boy twisted his small legs, but his eyes shone brightly, a clear sign that from this moment they were truly safe. Henry stood by the kitchen toasting bread and preparing tomato soup, his simple actions imbued with warmth, creating a genuine family space free from worries about electricity, water, or the hazards of old wiring. The aroma of butter and warm bread filled the room, bringing a smile to Maya's face for the first time in weeks, while Lila exhaled in quiet relief, and Owen eagerly lifted the lid of the soup, his eyes lighting up at the familiar scent. Henry set each bowl on the table, holding the children's hands as he served the soup and bread, reminding them that this was more than a meal. It was a moment for the family to connect, to talk, and to feel safe together. Maya sat beside them, her hands still trembling, but free from worry, beginning to share with Lila and Owen the stories of hard days, how their family had endured struggles about Lila's grandfather, and the lessons of resilience and responsibility he had imparted. Lila listened intently, watching every gesture of her mother, feeling the love and hidden strength within the story, while learning to observe and understand the responsibilities of being a family leader. Owen ate spoonfuls of soup occasionally, glancing at Henry with innocent curiosity, realizing that this man was not only a stranger, but also a protector and companion to them. Henry smiled, his eyes reflecting gentle light, recognizing that this simple dinner laid the foundation for trust, connection, and a lasting sense of security for the Thompson family. The four of them spoke about small things, happy memories, dreams, and even worries. All were heard and valued, creating a warmth they had not felt in a long time. When the meal ended, Lila and Owen helped clean up. Henry observed each action, gently reminding them about responsibility and discipline without diminishing the joy, teaching the family that safety and order did not exclude fun and bonding. Maya stood, her shoulders lighter, a feeling of reassurance settling within her, looking at Henry and silently knowing that from this moment they were no longer alone. The first night in the penthouse was not just a safe sleep, but the beginning of a new life where the family could breathe, connect, and grow under protection and with their dignity respected. As dinner concluded and the penthouse settled into a gentle quiet, Henry invited Maya and the children to sit around the table. His gaze was serious, yet deep, conveying that some lessons in courage and responsibility could only be fully understood through experience and stories from the past. He began telling Lila about her grandfather, who had served in the paratrooper forces during a fierce war in the past, about the harsh days spent in bomb shelters and on the battlefield, and how he maintained calm and resilience to protect his comrades. Henry highlighted a story of a small tin of peaches her grandfather had discovered in an abandoned house in the Arden forest, enough for 12 people, describing how he carefully distributed the syrup at the bottom of the tin to the youngest, taking the smallest portion for himself so that everyone could survive. Lila and Owen listened intently, eyes wide, imagining every vivid detail Henry painted, feeling the courage, sacrifice, and spirit of unity conveyed by the story. Maya sat beside them, watching Henry, her emotions stirred. Recognizing that his actions today, ensuring their safety, paying off debts, and providing better living conditions, were a way of honoring the legacy her father-in-law had left behind. acknowledging that her efforts and those of her children were seen and valued. Henry emphasized that the badge Lila wore was not merely decoration, but a symbol of courage, responsibility, and selflessness for the sake of others, teaching that the most important value from the war story was never to leave anyone behind and always stand up for those who depended on you. Lila felt warmth in her heart, understanding that every action, however small, caring for her brother or maintaining dignity in hardship, was a meaningful part of the family tradition and her grandfather's lessons that Henry had just recalled. Owen looked at his sister, his innocent eyes beginning to grasp that bravery was not only on the battlefield but also in everyday life in facing challenges and caring for one another. Maya lowered her head, tears sliding down her cheeks, proud and moved, realizing that Henry's story not only connected past and present, but also awakened the inner strength within her and her children, reminding them that family courage and dignity are always respected, and that the actions they took today would form the foundation for the Thompson family's future. The penthouse felt warmer than ever. The story of the badge, the tin of peaches, and the sacrifices linking wartime history with the present, creating a deep bond between Henry and the family, between Lila and Owen, and their family values, and between Maya and her sense of pride and gratitude, opening a new chapter where responsibility, courage, and love would guide their way forward. After the story about her grandfather and the badge, Maya exhaled a quiet sigh, her shoulders lowering as the weight of both pressure and pride seemed to merge within her. Lila held her brother's hand tightly, her eyes full of determination, yet radiating the trust that they were no longer facing hardships alone. Henry observed them and nodded slightly, knowing that his message had been received and that the family was ready to accept the support he offered. Maya looked around the spacious warm room, sensing the safety and comforts she had once only dared to imagine. She realized that accepting help did not mean losing independence, but was a step toward protecting her children and maintaining the family's dignity. Lila and Owen felt the change too, the relief filtering through each breath, each glance, each smile. Maya resolved that they would work with Henry to build a new, stable, and safe life where past struggles no longer weighed heavily, but instead became opportunities to learn and grow. Henry provided Maya with basic guidance on managing finances, safeguarding health, and maintaining household order while respecting her authority to make decisions, allowing her to continue leading the family while receiving the support they needed. The atmosphere in the room was filled with a sense of reassurance, a feeling of a controllable future where the Thompson family would no longer face pressures alone. During the subsequent dinner, Lila and Owen, together with Maya, spoke about dreams, hopes, and future plans. And for the first time in months, they felt the simple yet profound joy of safety and connection. This decision to accept help marked a pivotal turning point, opening the door to lasting change where the family could live with dignity, protection, and the opportunity to thrive without being burdened by material or emotional hardships. This shared understanding laid a solid foundation, allowing Lila, Owen, and Maya to begin a new chapter in their lives, one where love, security, and hope could coexist. After the Thompson family had settled into the temporary penthouse and realized they could accept support without losing their dignity, Henry began implementing the next step in his long-term plan, establishing an educational and community support fund to assist single-parent families and children in need of protection and learning opportunities, much like Lila and Owen. He discussed with Maya how to manage the fund, guiding her on overseeing grants, selecting families truly in need, and ensuring that every activity was transparent and effective. Lila was assigned to oversee educational programs, preparing books and materials, and assisting younger children. She felt the weight of her responsibility, but also discovered joy and meaning in every task. Henry explained that the fund was not merely financial support, but a source of inspiration, teaching children compassion, community spirit, and the value of sharing while providing opportunities to learn, develop skills, and confidently face the future. Maya realized that this was a way to give back for the past, using her own difficult experiences to help others, while protecting and nurturing the dignity and spirit of her own family. Henry emphasized to all three that every success of the educational and community fund would begin with caring for their own small family. How Lila and Owen learned to care for and support each other every day. He guided Maya on establishing long-term plans, managing the budget, organizing events, and securing sustainable resources while ensuring that children received full support for education, nutrition, and safety. Lila and Owen participated in activities ranging from organizing books and distributing school supplies to helping newly arrived children learning the value of giving and responsibility toward the community. The penthouse was filled with positive energy, laughter, conversation, and joy as children received educational gifts and heartfelt attention from the fund. Maya looked at Henry with gratitude and pride, realizing that his actions not only transformed their own family's life, but also opened opportunities for many other children and families, creating a meaningful and sustainable chain of impact. Henry looked at Lila and Owen, knowing that lessons of compassion, responsibility, and community connection had been instilled, that from now on they would not only receive support, but also learn to give back. Creating positive effects in society, nurturing a generation that cares, shares, and acts responsibly. The establishment of the Educational and Community Support Fund marked a pivotal turning point, transforming past hardships into opportunity, personal story into meaningful action, where the Thompson family was not only protected, but also contributing to the spread of values and love throughout the wider community. The Thompson family's new life began to take shape gradually each day, bringing a sense of safety, stability, and order they had never known before. Lila woke early, preparing breakfast for her little brother, checking homework and organizing books and supplies for the children in the fund. She oversaw learning planning, time management, and discipline under Henry's guidance. Owen cheerfully helped her set the table and tidy up toys, feeling the security around him, no longer afraid of the cold apartment or old electrical wiring they had left behind. After weeks of relentless stress, Maya could now focus on managing the fund, connecting with families in need, planning budgets, and monitoring the children's learning without the constant weight of rent or debt pressing down on her. Henry remained a watchful presence, observing from a distance rather than intervening directly, witnessing Lila's growing independence, Owen's joy and peace of mind, and Maya's confidence and leadership. Each morning they shared breakfast together, talking about the day's plans, the work at the fund, and lessons in discipline, responsibility, and mutual care. Lila learned to manage tasks while teaching Owen essential life skills, from organizing and self-care to helping others, building a foundation of independence and accountability. Maya noticed a marked difference in her children's spirits. Owen's smile was brighter, Lila's eyes confident and determined, filling her with both emotion and reassurance that her sacrifices and efforts had been rewarded in the most meaningful way. The penthouse was filled with warmth, order, and a steady rhythm, everyone learning to balance work, study, and rest, observing and caring for one another. Henry occasionally shared short stories about discipline and responsibility, mainly to inspire, reminding them that independence was not merely survival, but learning to grow, support others, and uphold dignity in all circumstances. Lila and Owen realized they were no longer children enduring hardships alone, but were living in a safe environment where they were encouraged to mature, develop self-reliance, and learn to care for their community. Maya looked at her children with pride, knowing that through timely support and lessons in discipline, courage, and responsibility, her family had entered a new life, stable, hopeful, and safe, where they had learned to take control of their own lives and simultaneously create a positive impact for themselves and those around them. One peaceful afternoon in the penthouse, sunlight poured through the tall windows, illuminating the expansive space, and Henry invited Maya and the children to sit around the table. His gaze was solemn, yet filled with emotion, ready to share an important lesson he wanted them to understand fully. He emphasized that everything he had done, from paying off the rent, ensuring the apartment's safety, providing Owen's birthday cake, to establishing the Educational and Community Support Fund, was not charity or pity, but an act of repayment for the past. Henry recounted the first time he met Maya's father, who had helped him as a young man, giving him a small sum of money that, though modest, had carried great meaning, giving him a chance to restart his life and career. He explained that now he was fulfilling a moral obligation, returning the trust and help once given, and that supporting the Thompson family was a way to honor her father's legacy, stressing that every action holds significance when it comes from respect and recognition of human dignity. Maya felt the weight of his words deeply, her heart overflowing with emotion, gratitude, and awe, realizing that what they received did not diminish her dignity or independence, but instead acknowledged and connected human beings through honesty, courage, and sacrifice. Lila and Owen listened with wide eyes, sensing the importance of gratitude, responsibility, and the value of actions rooted in fairness and compassion. Henry reminded them that repayment was not only about receiving, but also learning to give, that the Thompson family was now in a position not only to receive support, but to inspire and help others to become a community that spreads goodness while maintaining dignity. Owen smiled, lifting the little robot cake, his eyes shining as he realized that from this small cake the whole family had learned a profound lesson about gratitude and the true meaning of receiving help. Maya held Lila's hand, looking at Henry silently, understanding that from this moment the family was no longer alone, that the act of repayment had transformed their lives, creating a meaningful chain connecting past and present, the values of sacrifice and responsibility, while opening the way for the family to live in safety, dignity, and gratitude, where every action carries deep significance, not charity, but genuine recognition and honor. 6 months later, the Iron Star Foundation officially opened in the old building where the Thompson family had once lived, now transformed into a modern, bright yet warm and welcoming space. On the upper floors, the former apartments had been converted into safe, affordable homes for single mothers and their children, while the ground floor became a community center where children could learn, play, and receive full care. Early in the morning, a steady line of people formed outside, not with tension or hesitation, but with laughter and lively conversation. Maya walked among the tables, overseeing activities, guiding mothers as they received clothing and school supplies, and watching the children play. Her face glowed with health and pride, her eyes reflecting the joy of seeing her efforts making a tangible difference in the community. Lila stood at the counter distributing books, patiently checking in with each child. Her eyes sparkled as she realized the significance of her work, that every gift and every word of encouragement could change someone's life while teaching her responsibility, care, and leadership through real-world experience. Owen ran around the room bringing water and toys to younger children, his eyes full of joy as he watched them smile and laugh. He came to understand the lessons of sharing and community firsthand. Henry observed from the back, his eyes shining with satisfaction, knowing that his actions had created a lasting impact, not only for the Thompson family, but for many others, building an environment where kindness, fairness, and human dignity were central. The community center buzzed with positive energy, from children's laughter to mothers' words of thanks, to moments when Lila helped a child with homework, or Maya guided a mother in using resources effectively. Henry looked at Maya with gentle but firm eyes, reminding her that all they were doing was a continuation of the values of family sacrifice and never leaving anyone behind, principles he had learned from her father and the lessons of the wartime past. The warm atmosphere radiated a sense of unity, creating a community where people supported one another and offering a home for those who had once been alone or in need, turning the space into a place of hope, education, and opportunity. Lila and Owen clearly felt that their family was not only protected but also contributing to spreading values throughout the community, and Maya realized that their efforts, sacrifices, and acts of repayment had transformed lives. Not only her children's, but countless other families, creating a cycle of kindness, dignity, and deep connection within the community. The Iron Star Foundation became more than an organization. It was a living symbol of care, responsibility, and love, where every day was an opportunity to make a difference and nurture lasting values, a place where the Thompson family alongside Henry discovered the true meaning of working together to help and protect those who needed it most. As the afternoon gently faded, soft sunlight filled the room, and the Thompson family gathered around the dining table with Henry. The space was alive with laughter, conversation, and an indescribable warmth. Lila and Owen excitedly shared stories from their day at the Iron Star Foundation. The joy of helping younger children, the happiness of seeing the mother's bright eyes, and the pride of contributing to positive change in the community. Maya watched her children, sensing clearly that past struggles, pressures, and worries had transformed into strength, resilience, and unity, and that with timely support, they had not only overcome challenges, but had become capable of spreading values and kindness to others. Henry observed them, his eyes reflecting happiness and satisfaction, knowing that every effort of his, from repaying Maya's father to protecting and supporting this family, had created a profound impact, changing their lives while building a caring, compassionate community. Each simple moment emphasized life lessons about empathy, patience, responsibility toward others, and the importance of never leaving anyone behind, showing that even small acts of kindness can create a significant difference. The children learned that growing up was not only about facing hardships, but also about helping and bringing joy to those around them. This story reminds us all that generosity, care, and acts of repayment can transform lives in meaningful ways. Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Have you ever experienced moments when kindness, attention, or acts of gratitude changed your life or the life of someone close to you? Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, Emotional Echoes. Hit like and share to stay connected to more heartfelt, emotionally rich, and meaningful stories we share every day. We look forward to hearing your stories, emotions, and reflections, as every comment is a valuable voice from the hearts of our viewers. Farewell for now, and we wish everyone watching good health, joy, happiness, and peace each day. We'll see you again in the next video.